Welcome to Red Earth Conversations. I'm Chelsey Curry, the Executive Director of Red Earth. Today, I'm visiting with Chickasaw and Ponca artist Brent Greenwood to explore the stories behind his artwork, his artistic process, and what continues to inspire his work today as a contemporary Native artist. Red Earth Conversations is made possible through the support of Allied Arts. Their commitment to arts and cultural organizations help us to share Native voices and stories with audiences across Oklahoma and beyond. Additional support is provided by the UPS store number 3331 on North May. Thank you for helping bring Red Earth Conversations to life. Well, we are here today with Brent Greenwood, who is Chickasaw and Ponca, coming in to talk about his work and the things he's done for his tribe and his community. Thank you so much for coming today. Would you like to share with everybody about yourself a little bit, where you're from?
Well, thanks again for having me. I am excited to be a part of this year's festival once again. I've been around the Red Earth scene since I was a teenager in the 80s from the Powwow Festival. So I've grown up with Red Earth being a vital part of my upbringing, and more so as a dancer and singer in the beginning, but now as an artist it's kind of come full circle for me. So I'm just excited to be a part of this year's festival and everything that's coming back into the downtown city area with more of the dancing and just the whole atmosphere of it all. I'm excited for this year.
Well, yeah, we're so excited too. It's going to be bigger and better and have a lot more going on this year. And you said you started with us back in the 80s as a dancer. What did you dance?
Southern Straight Dance.
Okay. And still dance a little bit now, or focus more on the art?
It's more about my art. I sing around the big drum, as we say, with our Ponca singers and some other drum groups I've sang with over the years. We get together and sing at different dances, and it's always been about the culture for me, and the art and culture just kind of intersect and come together. And so, like I said, in the beginning years, it was more of actually spectator, and then later dancer and singer, and now artist.
So when did it transfer for you from more of the dance into art?
I've grown up around, our Ponca annual celebration, always been around that, camping. It's a big family reunion, if you will. And so always having that as a vital part of my life, that energy, that spirit. Hearing the music, there's just something that resonates and has resonated with me, to where as I got into my teens, I wanted to know more about the language and the songs, and just kind of took it upon myself and asking questions, and wanted to be more informed on that in that regard. And that's where it kind of really started opening my eyes up to like our oral traditions and histories. And then the art came after that to help relay that information through a visual context. And so the stories, the songs, the music, the dances, and not just on my Ponca side, but my Chickasaw side too, it's all about family and the heritage and the culture, and how that all connects us and who we are. And so through those traditions of storytelling and music and dance, that narrative came through in my paintings and art.
I love that. Being able to carry that tradition along in that way, in a more visual aspect, is amazing. Do you do any storytelling outside of the artwork and pass the actual story along sharing the piece that you have?
A lot of times there's a narrative behind it.
Okay.
Even this piece, for example, was dealing with statehood, and before Oklahoma was Oklahoma, and then incorporating something very, vital to our cultural lifeways was the bison, and everything that meant for our people is pretty much provided everything. So I incorporate that, the story of the bison, and then a little bit of the Oklahoma history. You see there's maps, there's dates, there's Indian Territory is listed on here, Oklahoma, the word for Oklahoma being Choctaw, red men, red people. So I just like to inform. I don't want to just be like in your face, but I want there to be subtle little hints of this and that within my art, so that people can look at that and maybe come back to it later and realize there's something there that they didn't see the first time, And even like, I wonder what he was saying about this or that, or what does that year mean? I'm gonna look that up. So there's information, little subtle tidbits and nuggets of information I embed in my paintings to like provide context for why I do what I do. And then the color palette for me is very important because I feel like it evokes an energy and an emotion, and I want that color palette to come across as something that will draw the viewer in, and then the information kind of speaks for itself after that. So
when did it really like stick for you, that color palette? Because I see your work and I can pretty much always be like, that's a Brent piece for sure, but was it always that color palette, or did it take a little bit to find it?
I think it took a little bit to find it, but when I think back to where those early influences came from, I was influenced by a lot of Oklahoma artists, the Jerome Tigers, Rance Hood. I began to, and growing up on South Side Oklahoma City, I began to look at just my surroundings, my environment from an urban, perspective. And there was a lot of graffiti, tagging and things like that. And one thing I gravitated to was that artwork on walls, which we've been doing forever. Our ancestors have been doing. Our ancestors are like the original graffiti writers from the cave paintings and art. And so thinking about that, the colors just really stood out to me on how to layer things, how to make things pop in front of the other and provide depth and perspective. And so I really kind of loved that. Well, fast forward 10 years, and that's when I really started realizing how I can use that color. I went to school at Oklahoma City University, then Institute of American Indian Arts, and through that instruction and learning those foundational courses, or taking those foundational courses, I learned all about composition, color theory, and like a light bulb went off, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is what I'm processing, and then through that narrative began to develop, and the colors came back, and I was influenced by abstract expressionism and like Mark Rothko, Robert Rauschenberg, all these artists that just really resonated with me in their application of paint and material and color usage. It all started kind of coming together for me, and then I used that to kind of incorporate to what I do. And so there, the stories start coming through, and that color was always something that I just felt like evoked what I wanted the message to be about. So
you're taking, a lot of inspiration over time from all these different artists and their styles. Do you feel like there's one that has really moved you more than others, or have they all just little bits and pieces you see as you're working in it? You're like, oh, there's a little bit of this artist.
Yeah, most definitely, and it's going to be, I think, the artist that a lot of people agree with and have been inspired by this individual, but T.C. Cannon. Growing up in a household that I would say I'm the first visual artist in that sense, and just had the encouragement, and encouraged me to go to college, which I did, as I said about the schooling, but that opened my eyes to everything. I had seen and grew up seeing T.C. Cannon paintings my whole life without even realizing who he was, but his work was just, it spoke to me, as it does a lot of Native artists. And so when I went to Santa Fe, that's when I realized and was able to put a face with a name, like, oh, that's who this guy is. And what he was saying, and he was just so ahead of his time for what he was doing. It blew my mind as the more I dove into his work and everything. So he was a great early inspiration in those years when I was trying to discover the narrative or the message I wanted to share. And so that's where I think if it wasn't for Santa Fe and being exposed to his work and his whole life story, I don't think I would honestly be doing what I'm doing today.
So he gave you such inspiration. You do so much now with education, with your art, how you are in the community. Have people come to you now and told you that you were their inspiration?
Yes, it's humbling. It's very humbling. With the Chickasaw Nation, I've taught with the Chickasaw Summer Arts Academy, and I've mentored several students who have gone on to have careers in art, and even the ones that haven't seem like they always circle back somehow and stay in touch and have mentioned my name and passing here or there for different things. And it's always humbling to know that, I had that or made that impression, And all I was wanting to do was to share how I did what I did to get there. And hopefully they could take a little bit of that and use it to however they wanted to manifest that into their work. And, talking to elders, hearing those stories, trying to gain those life experiences to fuel that passion to want to create, to explain those stories through a visual context. And so I just felt like that was the need, was to share. And even though T.C. Cannon or Rance Hood or some of these other artists I grew up being inspired by weren't there physically to share with me their knowledge and information, they did in other ways that made an indelible mark on me in my career. And so with that, I just used it in my way to help fuel the passion and desire for these young people by my instruction, by helping them to connect. Connection is like key, and for me, everyone's going to be different, right? But I just try to use that inspiration and fuel for these younger artists to get in touch with their culture by talking to elders and being around and observing everything around them, the elements, observing the environment around you, being engaged in all those conversations of our cultural lifeways and what makes us who we are as Indian people. So
I think it's really beautiful that you have, had that ability to be there and hear from people how much you inspired them in all these different ways, because I'm sure T.C. Cannon, Rance Hood would have loved to be able to hear that from you too. So I think it's really great that you've been able to touch so many lives in that way. And you talked about the culture and being able to inspire the kids you're working with and just people in general. Do you find that even today there's still a really big disconnect in people being able to connect with their culture, that you're bridging that gap for them?
I would like to think so. I feel like with all of our resources today, technology and how things are being disseminated, I feel like there's a greater information share happening. Of course, it can be overload too, and you got to understand too where some of this is coming from. We can't trust grandfather Google for everything, right? However, there's a wealth of information, and I think tribal resources are more readily available if you know and want to get in contact with those individuals that can share that with you. I still feel like there's a way you go about asking for things. I was raised kind of in a way like old school, like you just don't ask without giving something. That knowledge is sacred, and you take that knowledge and you have a responsibility to carry that on. So it's not just something you can just simply ask for and get. There's a protocol there to be able to receive, because you are now going to take that information and hopefully share it in a good way, in the proper way. So it's not just something you can just do a search for and obtain. I feel like there's still protocols there, and it's slowly, just from my perspective, it's slowly kind of fading away a little bit. People today sometimes don't ask. They just feel like they're entitled to this information, and they need to just go about it the right way. Now, art, for me, that's a little different, but I also have to know you're serious about it. And the thing is that I can see the serious nature of it with young people or individuals because of how they ask their questions. I can see that they're genuinely interested in wanting to be better at this or that. So I think that's the way it is with elders too. Sometimes you just gotta, at least for me, from my perspective, sometimes it's just a matter of you just taking time out to visit, have a cup of coffee or whatever, just visit with them, just as a one-on-one, to get this information. And it's not all about, oh, what did you say? And recording, like you're not there. That's really, that creates like oh, you're just there to get information out of me. That creates like they'll put up a barrier real quick. But anyway, like I said, kind of a long answer to that question is just I feel like the amount of resources we have available today does make it more accessible. And there's a lot of great things out there that I think just kind of touches the surface. And then it's up to the individual to really kind of maybe get in touch and delve into that with their own tribe and individuals they know they can talk to just visit, have a conversation. before these ways are gone, you know, and just following that respectful, humble way of honoring those individuals that have that information so that, you know, it can be shared and passed on for future generations.
So you had brought up a little earlier about being the first really like 2D artist in your family. Were your family beaters? What was their art form?
My family were involved in church, so raised up in the Methodist religion.
Okay.
I had a lot of gospel ties, you know, with church and singing and community and church groups and things like that. And so it was more about that side of things, and then being around cultural activities without really being a participant.
Okay.
So that meaning we were there at camps and doing powwows and things like that, but we weren't necessarily dancing or singing. But I think the fact that we were around it, that was vital into me becoming who I became. And that's where I think those foundational practices of just being around it, you know, practicing, being around the culture, that influence was impressed upon me. So therefore, you know, that is how I am and where I'm at in life. And so not only, you know, the social aspect of powwows, but my Ponca side, my family was heavily involved in the Native American church as well. So those experiences too are very special, because that, again, even though you don't see it in my paintings, there's a spiritual connection that's deeper than just this painting and the surface. There might be embers of a fire happening here, you know, that you see all these drips and splatters. That is somehow, some way coming through in this. You may not see that, but if I tell you like my experiences and influences come from the Native American church as well, you might see some of that in here with the colors and some of the things happening too. So anyway, I feel like my family, back to your question, if there was one thing they were in, was, I would say, culinary arts.
Oh, okay. That's a good thing to be in.
Yeah, awesome cooks in our family. I do have a piece of beadwork that my grandmother did from way back. And seamstresses, you know, we have a lot of great textile artists. My aunt, she's the one that would make all my dance shirts, my ribbon shirts. And so we do have, I think, the textiles, the culinary artists, the singers, to some, you know, in some regard, beadworkers in our family. But definitely, I think more of the influence of food and family, and just that community, that sense of community, is where I feel like a lot of this is derived from and shaped again for me as an artist, what I do.
And probably going to the powwows, even if you weren't participating, you were just there in the Native church at the powwows, it made you more comfortable in the culture, and then to eventually be able to ask. Because I know we do deal with a lot of the younger generation. If they're growing up in the city, they don't know where to go. Maybe they've never been to a powwow even.
Mm-hmm.
So having that ability to connect is really nice. So even just encouraging the younger generation to just go to the powwow. You don't have to dance, you don't have to do anything, just experience it.
To that point, one of the most humbling experiences I feel today is the fact that I did start a cultural singing class for Edmund Johnson O'Malley program, and had several young men and young ladies in that class, and I was just basically teaching them what I know, and wanted to stick to that Southern style of singing, that traditional style of singing, because we have hundreds upon hundreds of Ponca songs that we could sing for days on end. And now today, you know, there's all kinds of songs being composed, and there's like a way of singing that has evolved over the years that's even changed in my lifetime. But what I try to do is keep these young men like in tune with the way I was brought up to hear these songs, and who mentored me to sing and the way we sing our songs. And so I'm happy to say that today my son is up and coming young singer. He's actually going to be a head singer for his tribal powwow. this summer.
That's exciting.
His best friend, grew up in these singing classes as well. In fact, they're such good friends. Just last year, they became what we call Indian friends, and so they're going to take care of each other for the rest of their lives, and look out for one another. So he's a young singer too, and has had many head singing gigs as well. So others too that would sing are still involved, singing or dancing. So to me, that's very gratifying that I see that this legacy of singing, our singing tradition and culture, is going to be carried on. So that's another example, like just not through the arts but through the culture, that I see this legacy continuing, and I just really am humbled by that and just glad I was a small part of that.
I think you were a big part of it, but so you talked about your son. Do you have any other kids?
Yes, a daughter.
How many? A daughter as well? Okay. And is she into the arts? Is she into singing as well? Is she?
She loves karaoke.
Okay. Can't blame her for that.
Well, and definitely she has her degree in performing arts from University of Central Oklahoma. She has also recently been appointed the director for the Oklahoma Indigenous Theater Company. So she's definitely living her passion, living her dream, and she's very involved that way. And cool thing about my kids is they're both past youth art participants from Red Earth, and they've won the top awards in their categories in beadwork and drawing, textiles, and so it's very cool to be a part of this festival and market that has been very impressionable on my life growing up, and now my kids. So hopefully one day they'll come back too and be able to participate in some way. But they both, my daughter did dolls. She would make handmade dolls, and then my son was a beadworker and did drawing. So he's a great American flute player too. So anyway, there's a lot of different cultural things they're involved in, and I know Red Earth has been a part of their lives growing up as well. So hopefully they can come back in the fold in some way, shape, or form later.
That would be great. You have some really impressive kids. That's very cool that they're able to find their own way and be able to celebrate their art in the way that fits them.
Well, thanks. We're very proud. My wife Kenitha and I were, and this seems like eons ago, but in 2009 or 10, we were nominated and given the award of National Indian Parents of the Year. And my kids said, well, the reason they even got that award is because we're so awesome. So the kids took all the credit.
And I mean, parents, almost not only to them, but to all of the kids that you teach as well. So it feels like a very fitting title for you guys.
So my wife is a great seamstress, and she was raised up with a lot of traditional knowledge, and her mother is a great seamstress. There's a lot of things handed down family-wise that lent itself to doing these things. And so the kids just kind of like were around it. So that's where that kind of the influences came from, because we were doing it, and therefore we just kind of worked with them so that they could in turn do it. Now, as they got older, they don't do it as much because mom and dad aren't there like, you need to do this and that. But they still do it. And that's the thing I find with young people. And it's kind of like one of those things that you had to stay so engaged and so involved and encourage them to do it so they can see it for themselves. And that's where they kind of separate themselves from the ones that just do it as a hobby or do it because they had to the ones that really have it within them, the passion and desire, because it's not easy, as you know, in whatever it is that you do, being an artist, a muralist, a beadworker, you have to be a little crazy to do some of these things, to do and get accomplished what we get accomplished, because it's a job, but it's a job that it pulls from you and pulls from your inner being that you need to get it done. It's not when you punch the clock in, but you do definitely commit everything in your whole body, mind, and spirit to do this thing that for some reason just calls you to do it, and it's like it's a special calling, a special feeling and gratification that, I just finished this and I'm just so happy. As it gets closer to the completion of a painting, this is just me, I notice I start looking at it more. I just sit there and kind of like look over the total piece. It's not complete yet, but I look at what can I do? What can I, and more importantly, it's about the painting, letting me know what needs to be done. And sometimes, hey, I think it's good. I'm gonna call it quits, you know.
And sometimes that's the hardest part is just stepping back and being like, it's done, no more.
Yeah, exactly. Put the paintbrush down.
Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, that is something kind of just is that calling, that connection. It's all about the connection, and like I said, for the young people, for our own kids, we keep them engaged, keep them involved, and so with that, I feel like that will begin to kind of like be nurtured in them, so that someday they will continue it for themselves. So.
Mado for listening to Red Earth Conversations. This has been part 1 with Brent Greenwood. Please join us on Sunday as we continue the conversation and dive deeper into Brent's inspirations and artistic journey. Mado again for listening. We'll see you next time.